you believe that we started recording right in the middle of 2020 with all of the COVID and lockdowns going on around us, unable to meet up? So like many a young gentleman, we turned to the internet for our entertainment. Tried to find a place where we could meet up and talk about the good, the bad, and that time that Stu saw a pelican on the canal. In order to facilitate our dreams of answering all of the big questions in film, and after a few attempts at recording via other methods to various levels of success, we found Zencastr, a super easy web-based one-stop shop for recording. Log in and you're ready to record in a matter of seconds. It doesn't take a tech genius to get high quality audio or video. And on top of that, the one time we have had an issue, the fact that the multi-layered backups are stored locally means it's easily fixed all in browser. There are plenty of tools you need when you start podcasting, so let Zencastr take that headache away as it offers a place to record, edit and distribute all from one website. Any lazy bones Jones can pick up and play and have studio quality audio or 4K video put out for the world to see when using Zencastr. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code CAGEFIGHTING and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. And now, hit the music. Hello and welcome to Cage Fighting. I know I said we weren't going to be doing an episode this week, but here we are anyway, regardless.
Can't keep away. I say can't keep a bad dog down, but that's completely wrong anyway. Although how, given behind the scenes, I mean, this came out an hour ago. It's like, yeah, why don't we just do it? And I'm like, yeah, okay. This actually sounds like a poignant moment to do this as well. It makes sense to do it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can probably tell from the graphic of the episode we're going to be discussing Baby Reindeer, which has dropped on Netflix in the last couple of weeks and seems to have really gathered some steam, especially over the weekend somewhat. We'll get onto that a little bit later on. But yeah, we'll be talking about Baby Reindeer. Going into Baby Reindeer, Stu, I knew next to nothing other than people were taking the piss online. And there was a lot of sent from my iPhone jokes that I obviously didn't understand because I hadn't seen it. And it was all a bit... So I just went in completely blind on this one. And I think it threw me a little bit because there were so many jokes about it. I thought it was going to be quite a light and airy series. And it's not that, is it?
Well, it kind of starts off like that in a way. And you can, I mean, thankfully I was before all that started. I wasn't there at ground zero, but it wasn't like this, one of these where it just appears and then everyone talks about it straight away. It did take like a week or so for this to start. And I hadn't heard of it. I mean, I hadn't been on Netflix for a while anyway, for whatever reason. I'd watched Three Body Problem and that was fine. But this hadn't appeared. It hadn't come up and I hadn't looked for anything else, because I only wanted to watch that. So I think it was Nathan Judah on the Wolves poddy that mentioned it first. I know Matt had talked about it, but I thought,
yeah,
Baby Reindeer, it must just be what he sounds like. It must be like an Attenborough thing. And I thought nothing of it. And then when he said, it's about a stalker, but a female to male stalker, I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll give it a go. And that's all I knew. And then that's when my mind was blown.
It is a terrible, terrible title, isn't it? If you don't know anything about it, if you don't know the blurb behind it, Baby Reindeer is not an enticing show at all, is it? Let's be honest.
No. And I get it. I mean, it keeps you guessing, and you do get the reasoning behind the whole thing eventually. But I don't... Thinking about it, what else could you have said? What could you have said about it? I mean, Scottish terror. I know. I can't. It makes no sense, but it makes all the sense in the world because you can't think of anything better.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we spoke several times recently about Netflix's inability to promote multiple things over a period of time. And it feels like you are right. Nobody was talking about this, and it was very much a groundswell of not Netflix doing the promoting. It did come from other people who've sort of drummed up a bit of interest in this one, because I think this could easily have fallen into the abyss of Netflix and just gone completely by the wayside. But it's almost at the point now where it's 2024's Tiger King. Everybody's talking about it and everybody's jumping on this bandwagon now. So I think Netflix owe everybody else a bit of money for promoting their TV shows.
I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. They know how to play the game at this point, where things... I mean, they must know, because these things don't just appear out of nowhere. I mean, it probably didn't cost them that much. I mean, I've seen her in a few things in the past. But other than that, there isn't many people in this who've... There's like faces from TV that you know, if you watch a lot of British TV, but other than that, not really.
She's probably the most famous, or at least the most famous who springs to mind for me. And I know Richard Gadd, who's a stand-up comedian who's done some work in the writer's room on a few shows that I watch as well. But he's not a face I immediately recognised. I hadn't realised that this show was based on his semi-autobiographical play. So he actually wrote a one-man play about this whole event, which is then translated into the TV series, which I didn't realise until after I said to you, shall we do this episode? So that's quite interesting, really, that he's not really a name I recognised at all as a stand-up or anything. But a lot of this is about his life as a stand-up, or life as a struggling stand-up somewhat, isn't it?
Yeah, and we'll get onto the sleuthing nature of it later, but it did... As soon as I finished watching it, I thought, hang on a minute, if this is based on him, are these videos of him going to be on there? Are they going to be available to watch? Is he really as bad as it makes out in this show that he was back then? I never went down that rabbit hole because I didn't want to fry my own brain, but it does kind of... Like we talked about Neverending Story a few weeks ago, where... Are you the one watching the one watching the one? It's like, well, okay, there's like 7 degrees to separate the Kevin Bacon thing of this. Like, how far do you go? Because it is bizarre. I mean, the fact, if it didn't say based on a true story, I don't think it would have made any difference. It was still a mental program just in itself. The fact that it was semi-true, well, it was all true, but just not to him, was it? I think that was what it turned out to be. But the fact that these are true events, and obviously we know people are terrible and people do these things to each other, but I think the story in itself was great. I really enjoyed it. I was riveted more than enjoyed it.
Yeah, like I thought I'll start this and then we'll probably watch it over a couple of weekends. But it was one of these shows that as soon as I started it, I was just completely gripped throughout. I mean, I polished it off in an evening. It was strangely easy viewing for the subject matter. Like, I think they managed to toe the line that it was uncomfortable enough when it needed to be, but it never crossed over into, I need a break from it now. So I think they managed to sort of find the balance really nicely. Nicely is probably not the right word, but really successfully, I think they found the balance here that it was, as you say, gripping television.
Yeah. And I think, like we said, the first, I wasn't prepared for how it went in episode 4. I thought it was very light and happy. No, not happy, but it was funny how batshit insane she was.
Yeah, and she hadn't, I think by that point, she hadn't crossed over from being flirty, I want you as my boyfriend, I want you to be my husband and impregnate me. That's like the level she'd gotten to with her obsession. It hadn't crossed over quite into the, if you don't do this, I'm going to physically harm you and everybody you love. And I think end of episode 3 and the start of episode 4 is where it very much takes that turn into the realms of dealing with his trauma from it all. And obviously his trauma stems way back to a rape that happened when he was a student at some performing arts college, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? And at that point, it does really take a turn for the worse for the character and everybody around him, because I think the action there puts a different light on everybody. It almost... And I don't think that he's a bad person, but you do see his role in how his rape informed his later life. And I don't want to say he egged her on and that he encouraged it, but to some extent, he did enjoy having the drama, I think. And I think he even touches on that a little bit later, doesn't he? About how he became obsessed with her obsession.
Yeah, and it's almost... There's like that scene where he says, "I don't know where I am anymore." And after what happened to him, and then he's off and they show the things from like above the toilets and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, he's been so altered by what happened to him that he's almost egging it on. I think that's probably right. The fact that he doesn't not so much enjoy the attention, he needs the attention. It's like, if there is no attention, then what is he doing wrong? It's a classic thing that you hear of people who've been abused all the time, that they always blame themselves, but then when things don't happen to them, they also blame themselves. It's a horrible situation to get into.
Yeah, and like, we're no psychologists. Like, it's very much what we've heard via TV and film, isn't it? This sort of what's the word I'm looking for? This knowledge of how the cycle of abuse seems to go around. And I think he very much got into a cycle of abuse, both purported onto him and he gave to himself as well, I think. And it was quite interesting. I thought the fact that he chose to play himself, or a fictionalized version of himself, quite a brave thing to do, because obviously, as the writer and the person who experienced it, he's putting himself again in the position of experiencing it, albeit in the sanitized version. I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea for him on a human level, though. Almost, I don't know why you would want to put yourself feeling what you've already felt, or is it suffering for your art? Is that what he's doing here?
I mean, there is the question of how much of this is real, and does he want to punish himself again, and going through it again as a fictional version of himself? It's not like a Dennis Waterman write the theme tune, sing the theme tune, but it's not far off. Where, okay, you look at it from his point of view, getting this commissioned in the first place is pretty shocking. You see what I mean? It takes it to be on Netflix. I read today that he's got his next thing's going to be for the BBC. And you think, well, there you are. It's worked perfectly for you, hasn't it then? Because this wouldn't have been put on the BBC. Not a chance, not a million years. Never in a million years would this have been on there. Channel 4, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I mentioned to you earlier, It's a Sin last year, which was superb. Or the year before now, was it? I don't remember. But how you've never really seen anything like that before. And that was on free to air. This is buried on Netflix to some extent. And it's got into the public, I say, consciousness. It's everywhere. It's not just people. It was even on Gogglebox, I think. Someone was talking about it.
Okay.
So if it gets on there, and you know what that show is, and there's people talking about it, so it's one of them things where, fair play to him. I understand why he did it. You also got to question his sanity, because the amount of attention he's going to get now, and he has done, for good and bad. He's got to have pretty broad shoulders for this.
Yeah, and to briefly touch these, so some people have accused a woman out there of being the real life Martha, and she said that these things didn't happen. And obviously, the end of the show, it seems to be implying quite heavily that she's going to get sent down, and that I think that she gets sent down, was it for 9 months?
9 months,
or something like that. And I think if all this happened, then it would have happened in the real world as well. Maybe is this his way of rewriting his own history? I didn't look into this accused woman, into her history of did she actually go to jail. And I feel like that Netflix has a duty of care to the people, because this is based on real events, that they have to be very careful. They have to tread very lightly, because there are people outside of Richard Gadd who could get really hurt. And quite clearly, if this woman is a real person, she clearly has a mental illness that needs help. And people shouldn't be out there on Twitter throwing out accusations and taking the piss, because she's an ill woman who needs to be given some form of help, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree, and I'll say at the same time, for the people who don't agree, that it's not up to Netflix to sort people's lives out, and that should have happened to her by the services available in this country and in Scotland years ago. And the fact that the statements that she's come out with, it's I mean, you put your life on it being her, because she sounds the same. Not saying she looks the same, but she sounds the same. The way she's talking is exactly how it's implied in the show. But again, this would have all been cleared by legal beforehand. So the fact that she says she's going to sue Netflix, and then you look at she was sacked for wildly inappropriate behaviour on her first day of a law job and all this stuff, and you think, oh well, okay, it's clearly her. But at the same time, there's no way people should be going harassing her, and just leave her alone. This is the thing. Yeah, obviously she's real. She's clearly quite insane, and that needs sorting out. But that needs to be sorted out by the relevant people, not through a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the real woman actually got sent to jail, but if she did, that's the time and the place really to make sure she gets the help that she needed. What worries me though is the next step is people trying to figure out who the alleged rapist is in this story. If you're throwing around accusations of rape at people, especially someone who hasn't been tried legally, you're opening yourself up to actual defamation suits and stuff. So it's not funny what they did to this other woman, but this one is so much worse, because without any proof, you're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that can come back to bite you. So that one, I really think people need to think about what they're doing before they start delving into who's worked with Richard Gadd before. They're playing with fire there that could go badly, badly wrong, especially if the victim hasn't come out and accused anybody and hasn't been and reported it to the police. As bad as that is, I don't know if people are going the right way about dealing with that one personally.
And he never said that was a bit him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There's parts of this story, the Martha part was true, or whatever her name was, but he said he also took inspiration from other abuse victims and wove it into the story. It's not necessarily all about him, so it might not even. So people can look at, and this is exactly like what happened with Wolves last week, with that story that came out in the Daily Mail about the 19-year-old footballers. And because the Twitter detectives found out that, Wolves were playing at home that weekend. So when they said they were arrested at their own stadium, why would they be at the stadium and all this stuff? And the fact that the club had to come out and put a statement out saying it was none of our players. You think, well, on one hand, yeah, that's great. Like what friend of the Suggest said on Twitter that, yeah, you can't be, well, that's great for us. You can't still be celebrating the fact that, it's not our problem, because the woman's still been raped or abused or whatever. So you can't. And the Lawrence Fox thing, he might be a bellend, but he went too far and he got done, buddy. So this is what's going to happen now. People can't help themselves.
Yeah, it's people not realising that what you say on Twitter is actually saying stuff in the real world that people can actually see and is actionable. I just think people need to be a bit more responsible with what they put out into the world. And unfortunately, in cases like this, you have to leave it to the professionals, I think. You can't just be bell end on Twitter and that makes you okay. It's very questionable actions going on out there. But we've mentioned Martha a few times. Jessica Gunning played Martha. I thought she was fucking brilliant in this because she went from everything from being that playful, bubbly, happy-go-lucky person to someone. I mean, Bunny Boiler is the term, isn't it? I think that's been popularised for this type of character. She played a real gamut with a smile on her face throughout that you genuinely believed that she embodied the character so well. I said to both yourself and Matt in the group chat, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if she was nominated for awards off the back of this. I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah, easily. And for someone who just looking through her IMDb, I've seen her in things, and I've only ever seen her in like kind of not so much serious things, but never comedy, which she could quite easily do because she looks like a funny person as well. But she did. I mean, she wrote the line perfectly, and it worked to such an extent where the times when she did flip out, it was genuinely like, "Whoa, come on now, calm down," because you think, well, how have you gone from this to like the nuclear war in the space of seconds? And it was superb. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and this is some of the performances in this are up there with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mr. Bates and versus The Office and this so far are probably two of the best TV shows or best new TV shows of 2024. Both been absolutely outstanding. But with Jessica Gunning, because I was racking my brains trying to figure out what I knew her from, and I know her from a show called Back, which I don't know if you've ever heard of, but it's Mitchell and Webb peep show. So Matt may know of this one, but basically one plays an estranged brother who returns back after the death of the patriarch of the family. And it's a bit of a dark comedy. It's very good. And she plays this sort of bubbly, silly, funny barmaid in it. And she's fantastic in it. She's always got a smile on her face. So when I saw her in this, and I was like, that sort of fits what I know her to be.
And so
then she's talking about just this absolute horror stuff later on in the series. You think, oh yeah, you've got it all. You're really good. So yeah, I'm quite interested to see what comes next for her because I feel she's probably the breakout star when it comes to acting. As you've already said with Gad, he's going to be moving on to writing for the BBC, and he's done himself no harms, I think, by putting this one onto TV. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see what's next for Gunning. Very impressed with her. What I thought was really interesting though, so something you touched on saying about how this could sort of impact sort of a wider audience because it's something about having a male victim in what is predominantly portrayed as having been female victims. Like it always appears on TV, obviously victims of rape tend to be female, victims of stalking tend to be female. So the role of the police in this I thought was really interesting because they come across as wildly inept, but also massively dismissive of having a man talking about being harassed by a woman when it's just emails, it's just banter, that sort of reaction to it. I thought that was a really interesting way of showing it because it's not something I think that we get a lot of depth to, generally speaking, in everyday TV.
No, well, that's what drew me to it in the first place because it was so rare. And I can't think of, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other one like this. I mean, you might have got like one episode of like Touch of Frost or something where they kind of touch on it in like that kind of thing as a one-off, but not specifically about this subject now. And it is, I mean, it does happen. I mean, I'm not saying that happened to me, but I was with someone years ago who we were both absolutely smashed the one night, and I was on all fours, not like that. But we were away and I went to turn the telly on and said something crass or ridiculous or something. And she proper booted me in the ribs and I had like a bruised ribs. It was completely out of character, like, and nothing ever came of it. It was like, well, that was obviously a bad thing to do. But this stuff does happen. It does happen. And it's not just one-sided. So I can quite easily see how, because it doesn't get talked about, and you got the guy. I mean, this was based in looking at the phones as well. It was like 2015, something like that. Looking at the style of phones that it was, and the bubbles and everything, and the scent from my iPhone. That would have been just laughed about then. I think nearly 10 years later, it's a bit different. And I think that this has brought, if it lasts, who knows, but it has shone a light on the issues. Like, these things, when they're done properly, they always do.
Yeah, and I think it's good to see I say it's good, it's important to see the other side of the coin at times, I think, because all too often it does get completely ignored. And you can tell from, depending on how true it is, you can tell how much it genuinely impacted his life for quite a period of time, and probably still does to quite an extent, I imagine. It's not something you get over easily. The only other time I can remember anything similar, I remember way back when, Hollyoaks After Dark, some male character got raped on that, and I feel like that was probably the only other time that springs to mind that a mainstream TV show had something that was not, or was a little less out of the ordinary when it came to that. And I feel like that probably had quite an impact, but that was so long ago now that it's probably, sent to the sands of time somewhat and got forgotten. So I do think this is quite an important show to show that these things do happen.
And there's the other angle as well that no one even talks about this show, is how well they portray the trans woman.
Oh yeah, like, it wasn't even a thing, was it? Until he was talking about his issues with his sexuality and covering that. It was just that, oh yeah, this is just his partner. And that was really refreshing. It wasn't a political statement that trans people seem to have become, sadly, in the last couple of years. It's very rare that you see a trans person on TV without there being a trans policy sort of behind it. It was just treated as it should be, that it was just a person that he was falling in love with. I thought it was a really good representation of the character.
I mean, it helps having a trans woman play a trans woman as well, not like the Coronation Street Hayley situation. And like we had in Supergirl. No, not Supergirl. Yeah, Supergirl.
Yeah, Supergirl, yeah.
But that was never even brought up, was it, until later on? Worked perfectly, not a problem. Okay, so you've got a show about a guy who's been stalked and abused by this lunatic woman who's gone through being raped and drugged and raped again over and groomed, like he says himself.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's in this relationship with a trans woman, and yet the fact that she's a trans woman is in the show because that's what he goes looking for. But it's never a thing of, okay, other than when Martha calls her a man, and that's quite generally sad, and she's lying there on the floor and she just slaps her around a bit, and you think, this woman's insane. She's a complete psychopath. She needs to be stopped. And you do feel for her. And we were talking about it the other day. There's something about Miriam that was only 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought it was really well handled. And yeah, that was probably the most harrowing scene. I thought that fight in the pub between the two female characters, was probably as close to the knuckle as anything else. I think it was quite tough going. And when she pulled a clump of her hair out, that turned my stomach a little bit. But it was so well done. Yeah, fantastically well done. So some of the themes that I thought were quite interesting in this show. So obviously, it's about stalking, and I really like how they delved into his trauma, how the past actions of the rape influenced everything that he did after it, how like his sexual identity sort of stemmed from that incident, and that's where it all grew from, and it impacted everything else that came after, to the extent that he just became utterly obsessed with Martha himself. So he was obsessed with someone who was obsessed with him. I just thought that was really fascinating to show that people are complicated, that it isn't just always absolutely straightforward. The depth that they gave to the character was incredible, and I don't think that's something we see in a lot of TV shows. Everything seems to be, there's a victim and there's a perpetrator. But I felt that Baby Reindeer did such a good job of saying that, yeah, he is a victim, but he's also a perpetrator as well. There are elements to his own life that he invited the issues onto himself, and that he's not entirely blameless, even though obviously what happened to him was so far out of the realms that, you can't really blame him for what happened next. But I just thought that was really fascinating. He just added such a depth to his character.
Yeah, I think we've got an alternative title there. You could have called it The Grey Area, because there's so many characters in this that are either not one or the other, which makes them more real because no one is. And
yeah,
you look at him and you think, well, yeah, the guy who did that to him, he's nice as pie and he's there writing, and the fact that when he goes back afterward, I mean, that was a kind of a drop jaw moment. What? And just craziness. But again, like we said at the start, it's Stockholm syndrome, isn't it, as well, I suppose?
Yeah.
He knows what he's getting into. He wants to talk to closure or whatever. You never kind of see what. I mean, we probably ain't going to get a second season of this, because why would you? But it's left open to interpretation, and you think, okay, that from what I thought first, I thought, okay, he's just gone there to kind of show he's the bigger man, and obviously he's seen it and showing no remorse whatsoever. And then he walks away. You think, does he really got to work with him? I didn't think so, but then I looked online, and so many people did. So many people thought, oh, he's in his trap. He's worked. He's successful. So even that was a talking point as well. He's just brilliant.
It was quite interesting because did you ever watch Extras, the Ricky Gervais?
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that towards the end. And obviously I know it's a very different sort of setup, and one's very comedy and one's very not, especially at that point in the show. But when he's talking about the trappings of fame, when Ricky Gervais is Andy Millman's talking about the trappings of fame, how you do everything, you basically become a whore because you just want to be famous, and it doesn't really matter what for even. And I found it really interesting because in this, Donnie talks about Gervais being one of his comedic heroes. And the end of this goes very much the same, that he's starting to come to grips with the fact that he was hungry for fame to the extent that he kept going back to a man he knew was abusing him and was grooming him. And then you think he's broke that cycle, and then he goes back to him and gets that opportunity. So I did draw some parallels between this and Extras, that I don't know if Richard Gadd is also a Gervais fan. I presume he probably is, because of, I mean, he was born in 1990, so it sort of ties in age-wise that he'd be a fan of The Office and those shows that were the early 2000s. So, yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting parallel there. And I do wonder how much of that was actually true, or whether that was Richard Gadd's statement on fame rather than what actually happened in the real world. I'd love to know more, but that's just me being a nosy cunt, I think.
I mean, it is addictive, though. I mean, doing this is not fame. Although the whole thing of fans of the fan cast coming over from America and wanting to buy you a drink because you give them entertainment every week, and which is nice, but it's also weird. But then at the same time, you think, okay, well, let's do more. Rather than 3 podcasts in 12 hours. It's like, yeah, okay, more. So I get it even from a Z-list Wolverhampton celebrity point of view. But at the same time, you've got to be some kind of damaged character, and they showed how damaged he was and why he was damaged. And it made sense. I think that's what, with all these abuse things in the past, it's never made sense before. Even for most of them being women and going back, because obviously not a woman. So yeah, the temptation's there to piss about as always, but I feel like I can't do it today. Not on this one. But now that, because I never really got it before, I thought, well, why are you doing it? Like the whole Stockholm syndrome thing. Why would you? And then you think, okay, you flip it and you think, okay, so you show what this guy's up against, what he's been through, yet he still wants it, and it explained it more than anything ever has done before. So I celebrate it for that as well. It actually, it actually opened my mind to things which I'd never. When they were talking about what this show was, and I thought, okay, and then the way it went, I never thought it was going to go like that.
No. But there's the bit at the end where obviously he becomes obsessed with figuring it out. The case has been done and everything's sort of put into its box quite nicely at that point, but he can't let it go. And I really got that. I understand that obsession to need to understand everything. That really sort of hit home for me, that I was like, okay, I'm a bit like that things can't just be enough. I need to have, like I can't just watch some of Nick Cage's films. I need to watch the whole back catalogue. Like it's that kind of ridiculousness that I get, and I understand how obsession can overtake you quite easily, I think. And when you remove, she was obviously a massive part of his life, whether or not, he obviously didn't want it to be, but it was. And losing that must have been a little bit like, I don't want to say grieving the loss of, a friend, but I can understand that he has lost a big part of his life. So we must want to understand why that is. I thought that was fascinating that it ends with him finally figuring it out and the end becoming the beginning. So it all begins with Donnie offering Martha a cup of tea because she looks like she needs it. And it ends with him being given a free drink because he looks like he needs it. And I just thought that was fucking brilliant. Like, I was just, I marvelled at the TV at that. I was like, this is so good. And it's taken me 48 hours of just constantly thinking about it to finally put some pieces together. I just think it's so well done, so well layered, really enjoyable.
Especially for someone who hasn't done this before.
Yeah, looking at his IMDb, his writing stuff seems to be writing on panel shows, and he's done a few short films. He did the Ultimate Warrior show with John Richardson, which is what I've seen him from, or seen his work from, should I say. So he's done bits and bobs, but nothing. Oh, he's done Sex Education as well, but nothing major. Only one episode of Sex Education, so it's not like he's a known writer of this type of TV work. It seems like he's more comedy. So yeah, for this to be your first real foray into that world, he's just incredible. Well, he's already on an 8.1 on IMDb, and like there aren't many writers who can boast of that, I think.
No, and it was on 100% on Rotten Tomatoes as well.
Wouldn't be surprised. I can't imagine there'll be many critics out there who will bash this one, because it approaches those topics with both a sincerity and a deft touch for the most, I think. Like, it doesn't ever feel exploitative of any of the characters, which is probably because he's one of the characters. So he does handle things very, very well throughout this. Even to the extent that I don't feel that Martha she's not made out to be a villain, is she? She's made out to be a very sick woman.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not.
I think
the only bad guy in the show is the writer. He's the only bad guy in the show, because that's premeditated. He knows exactly what he's doing. But she's just not right in the head, to put it in the 90s term.
Yeah.
She's messed up, and she's almost beyond help. And there's so many of them kind of people around, especially at that time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, with the way things have been going, like there's just not the funding there to help everybody, and it's a crying shame to think there must be people out there who need the help and just can't get it. So looking on IMDb, it's now at 97. So I'm guessing there is one rotten review. Typical, but yeah, 84% on the audience score, 97 on the critical. I mean, that's still a phenomenal score. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I think it is. Personally, I think I have it slightly above Bates. Personally, I think Bates is a nice, straightforward story. I feel this has got a lot of layers, which is the kind of thing I generally like. So I think this probably just edges it for the TV show of the year. so far, personally, for me.
I'm going to give it stewing time, ironically. It's too recent in my head. I need to watch something else first, and then kind of judge it at the end of the year like we always do, because at the minute, I know exactly what you mean. I think, and them both being true as well, to some extent, it's quite shocking. But then when you've got things like how good Fallout was, I know you haven't liked it so far, but...
No, it's been fine, but that's it, just fine.
Yeah, and Shogun as well, and for something like this to be up there and talked about in the budget on these other shows and the funding behind Mr. Bates and the Post Office from ITV, for a little Netflix show from one guy, it's tremendous. It's a massive success. Fair play to him.
Yeah. I think next year, I know we normally do like top 5 film and TV if you want. We could quite easily do a top 5 film and a top 5 TV. Because it's been a strong year so far, actually. I think there's been a lot of things I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to think about that for next year and see if we can fit one of those in maybe. Lovely. So, Stu, I'm guessing you're going to recommend this to everybody.
Yeah, and I have. And one of the reasons why, because I'd watched the first 3 episodes, and then before last weekend, it was who was that game? It was Arsenal, wasn't it? And I'd already heard rumblings of people who I sit with and in the club and everything beforehand. They started talking about it. I thought, right, okay, I need to power through this. So I watched 4 and 5, thinking it was a 5-parter, and then it was 7. I thought, oh no. And it was like 11:30 at night, and I thought, well, no one's going to have watched all of them yet, surely. And so I got in there, and people were talking about it, and no one had, thankfully. So once I sobered up on the Sunday, I watched the last 2. And then literally I went around my mum's, and they'd all watched the last 2 the same time. They'd all had the same idea. And it's like, well, you never watched anything I say after the Saltburn incident. He said, I can't trust you ever again. I went, no, yeah, but that was an extreme one-off.
Mm-hmm.
But she, independently of me, she'd watch it on her own. So yeah, if you're not part of the millions now who have watched it, yeah, I don't think anything we've said in this is even it probably is a little spoilery, but who cares? It's the fact that it's been made. It's such a serious thing, and it's still been memed so much. I mean, there's this as well. I mean, this one.
Gentle reminder not to give out any free drinks this weekend.
And so that went around the pub WhatsApp group straight away.
Yeah,
everyone in there has seen him. My boss last week, when I saw her because she'd been off, she was in there on last Tuesday, and first thing she came to me, said, "You watch this stuff? Have you seen Baby Reindeer?" I went, yes. And she, it's fucking insane. And all this, and didn't get any work done for half hour because he was just talking about this, and it was like, well, yeah, it works. Word of mouth works perfectly for things like this. So yeah, recommend to everyone.
Yeah, I think I'd even recommend this to my mom, who doesn't really watch a great deal of TV. Like, she watches a lot of football, and that's pretty much it. But I think she would really enjoy this. So I'd be recommending this to anybody, because it has that rare ability of both being for the kind of people who don't give a shit about the deeper stuff. They just want an interesting story. It's got that. But if you want to look behind that as well and see some of the actual depth and themes and, devices, storytelling devices that are within this show, it's all there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think no matter what you enjoy, you can get that out of this show because it's so well done. So yeah, absolutely think everyone should give this a watch at their earliest opportunity. And to be fair, it's like, 3.5 hours worth of TV?
Yeah, they're only half hour long.
Yeah, so 7 episodes, half an hour-ish, give or take. So, yeah, give it a watch. Absolutely give it a watch. Right, okay, so we'll be back next week. Question casting once again. We'll put a call out for some questions over the next couple of days. So please make sure you get in touch with us. It'll be at Cage Fighting Pod or cagefightingpod@gmail.com on the emails. Please make sure you subscribe to whatever podcast it is that you're listening to us on as well. And a 5-star review would be lovely. Thank you very much. And for this week, Stu, would you like to say goodbye?
Yeah, goodbye, everyone. And in a serious note, if people need to talk to the relevant people, or even us. We're there. Goodbye. See, you laugh. I tried to be nice for a change. I tried to be sensible. And you still got laughter. There we are.
It's when you try to be sincere, Stu.
But I was being sincere. It's just I can't help my face looking like this, can I?
He's right, though. DMs are always open. And yeah, we're more than happy to talk, or at least point you to the right people if it's something we can't help with. But yep, have a good one. And remember, be excellent to each other.